For nearly 5 decades, the world stood on the brink of annihilation. A silent war, fought in shadows and politics, gripped the world in fear. The Cold War was a battle of ideologies, a struggle between two superpowers, the United States and the Soviet Union, that brought humanity closer than ever to nuclear war. But just how close did we come to global destruction? Let's uncover the terrifying moments when the Cold War nearly turned hot. The Cold War was born out of the ashes of World War II. The United States and the Soviet Union had been allies against Nazi Germany, but their ideological differences were too vast to ignore. Communism and capitalism were now locked in an existential battle. With Europe divided, West under American influence and East under Soviet control, the world entered an age of espionage, propaganda, and the constant threat of nuclear annihilation. Both superpowers engaged in a terrifying build-up of nuclear weapons. By the 1950s, the US and USSR had enough nuclear bombs to destroy the planet multiple times over. The doctrine of mutually assured destruction, or MAD, ensured that if one nation launched an attack, the other would retaliate, leading to total annihilation. But despite this, neither side backed down. The competition wasn't just military, it extended to space. The launch of Sputnik by the Soviets in 1957 shocked the United States and fueled the space race, another battlefield of Cold War tensions. The first major confrontation came in Berlin. The Soviets built the Berlin Wall in 1961 to prevent East Germans from fleeing to the West. It became a physical symbol of Cold War division. But the world's closest brush with nuclear war came in 1962, the Cuban Missile Crisis. In October 1962, US reconnaissance planes discovered Soviet nuclear missiles in Cuba, just 90 miles from American shores. This led to a 13-day standoff between President John F. Kennedy and Soviet leader Nikita Khrushchev. The world watched in terror as both nations prepared for nuclear war. A naval blockade was imposed and military forces were put on high alert. One wrong move could have meant global destruction. In a desperate bid to avoid war, secret negotiations were held. Ultimately, the Soviets agreed to remove the missiles from Cuba in exchange for the US withdrawing its missiles from Turkey. The crisis ended, but it proved just how close the world had come to nuclear catastrophe. The Cuban Missile Crisis wasn't the only time the world came close to nuclear war. In 1983, Soviet early warning systems falsely detected an incoming US missile attack. A single officer, Stanislav Petrov, chose to ignore the alert, believing it to be a false alarm. His decision likely prevented a catastrophic nuclear exchange. The same year, a NATO military exercise called Able Archer nearly triggered a Soviet counterattack. The USSR mistook the war games for a real invasion and prepared to launch nuclear missiles. Tensions were only diffused when intelligence revealed the misunderstanding. By the 1980s, economic struggles and internal pressures weakened the Soviet Union. Mikhail Gorbachev introduced reforms like perestroika and glasnost, opening the Soviet economy and promoting transparency. US President Ronald Reagan and Gorbachev held historic summits leading to arms reduction agreements. In 1989, the Berlin Wall fell, symbolizing the end of Cold War tensions. 2 years later, in 1991, the Soviet Union collapsed, marking the official end of the Cold War. The world had survived nearly 5 decades of nuclear brinkmanship. Though the Cold War officially ended, the threat of nuclear war has not disappeared. Modern tensions between nuclear-armed nations remind us that history's lessons must never be forgotten. The world once stood on the edge of destruction, and it could again. Let's learn from the past to ensure that the mistakes of the Cold War are never repeated. If you enjoyed this deep dive into history, don't forget to like, share and subscribe to History with Arslan for more compelling stories from the past. See you in the next video.